Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for a video channel. And this is segment number 3, or book review number 3, on the Hunt for Skinwalker. This is the first book that started it all on Skinwalker Ranch. Written by Colin Kelleher and George Knapp. And the book is really the starting point for the stories of Skinwalker Ranch and the background before NABS, or Mr. Bigelow, bought it. Now, the first two segments had some comments from some of you saying, "Hey, Paulides, get the names right." Blah, blah, blah. Friends, the name that George Knapp and Colin Kelleher gave the owners of the ranch was the Gormans in the book. And it was to protect the privacy of the first ranchers. Now, they may have released their names at some point in the future. I'm not going to say it because it wasn't brought up in the book. So stick to the facts in the book. So the rancher's named Tom Gorman. And George made it a special point, and Colin, to explain that somebody who raises prize bulls, prize cattle, they take a lot of integrity and a lot of respect for those animals, and they treat them super well, as Gorman did to his. Now, the winter of 94-95, a lot of things odd happened at the ranch. Pay special attention that in the book it said the winter of 94-95. Now, it was during a severe snowstorm, a weather event, that Tom was looking for one of his prize breeding cattle. Well, there was 12 inches of snow on the ground, and he tracked it through the ranch into a very thick area that most of the cattle didn't go into. Now, there's a statement in the book that says predators usually don't hunt in the snow or in a snowstorm. Keep that in mind. Now, Gorman said he could tell the cow started to run as he was tracking it. Well, that's pretty unusual. And the only tracks he could see was of his cow. So the tracks eventually made their way into a clearing and stopped. And Mr. Gorman said there was no doubt about it. The tracks just stopped in this clearing. The last 4 tracks showed the cow running at full speed. Well, Gorman spent an inordinate amount of time searching, but the issue is that the tracks just stopped. It's like at that point something just pulled it up and took it away. Well, he then searched the area in a grid pattern trying to find where it went. So the question is, what would lift, or what could lift, 1,000-pound cattle in the middle of a blazing snowstorm with the owner right there and heard nothing? Question is that the authors put is, could the cow have ran into a doorway of some type? Meaning a portal. Well, Mr. Gorman never saw that cow again. It is completely gone. Now, when I read this, it reminded me of many of the missing person cases that I write about, where the people are just gone. No tracks, no scent trail. And then I'll remind you of a story. Angie and I were hiking in Colorado, northern Colorado, way up in the mountains. And it was a trail that paralleled a river. And it had snowed about 4 or 5 inches that night. We got on the trail pretty early. It was snowing very lightly. Nobody was on the trail in front of us. About, I'm going to guess, maybe 2 miles in. All of a sudden, we both stopped. And down this hillside come these tracks, one right in front of the other, across the trail we're on, towards the river. But they stop about 10 feet, 20 feet from the river. They just stop. There's no trees around. There's no place to go. They just stop. And yes, the tracks look like giant human tracks. Explain that. You can't. So the experience that Mr. Gorman had is something I understand. Now, being just a rancher, a common folk kind of guy, the idea that he's going to run across this and understand it, he's not going to understand it. He's going to get mad. He's thinking somebody came onto his property, stole his prized breeding cow, and he's left without money. Because that is what feeds the family, the cattle. And during the next 4 months after he lost that, 4 more cattle disappeared that he couldn't find. A lot of times he thought maybe a fence was broken. He'd go out and check the fence. Then he thought somebody was stealing from him and driving onto the property, putting it in a trailer, but none of that happened. Keep that in mind. So in April of '95, there was a severe rainstorm, weather event that inundated the ranch. Tom and his son named Tad went out in the blazing rain to bring the cows in. They stated there was about 20 foot of visibility. That's how hard it was raining. So they're on their horses, and Tad is chasing a calf that was 2 months old. As he passes the calf, he goes by a small canal. And there in the canal is one of the heifers stuck in there because it's muddy and it can't get out. And it was described as bawling loudly. Well, Tad knew that that was in distress and he needed to get to that, but he also needed to get this calf back in. So he chases the calf down on the horse, grabs it, pulls it, rears it back into the main part of the yard with its mom, and then goes back for the heifer. Total time away from the heifer, 20 minutes. Rain never stopped, huge rainstorm. He approaches the canal that's not very deep, even with the rain, and the cow was lying in the water, motionless, dead. This kind of puzzled Tad because the water in the canal wasn't deep enough for the heifer to die or drown. So he dismounts his horse, jumps into the canal, and immediately starts yelling for his dad. The cow had been mutilated in that 20 minutes. Its rear end had been hollowed out. Tom got there, jumped into the canal, and was absolutely irate. He looks around. There's no other tracks other than Tad and the cow. There's no other tracks coming into the canal other than Tad and now him. And there's no blood at all in the canal. It's not moving very fast. The cut was 6 inches in diameter, perfectly circular. It's like a trained surgeon did this. He said the cuts weren't jagged, they were smooth like a surgical knife. Tad explained to his dad that he had seen this heifer alive just 20 minutes ago, and it was struggling to get out of the canal. Well, his dad knew that he had to put the priority on the calf, and heifer's going to be fine, and yet he did come back. But what could do this in 20 minutes? Obviously not on scene because there's no blood. How could they take it away, do all of this medical work, dissection, put it back, nobody hear anything, nobody see anything? And you don't think that cow would have been bellowing? So the loss of the animals were a huge emotional hit on the Gormans. Imagine if you bought this property and you thought it was pristine to raise a family and raise your cattle, and all of a sudden they start disappearing one at a time. And you're thinking, what is going on? So, weather obscured any evidence. It happened almost in the presence of Tom and Tad. Now, when I thought about this, I thought about Tad. Why? Young man, very few life experiences, had never seen a mutilated cow. Did the entity do this for Tad? Were they gauging his response to this? Seeing how he'd respond? Watching his emotional level? I don't know. I think it's peculiar that all of these things are happening during weather events. Three months after the heifer, Tom later found another mutilated cow in the far corner of his property. Stop here. Whatever entity is doing the mutilations, whether it's our government, whether it's UFOs, whether it's another type of living creature we don't understand, whatever it is, if they have the ability to take that thing in our presence and us not hear, see, smell anything, well, then they have the ability to put that thing anywhere they want. They could dump it in the middle of the ocean, probably. They could put it in the middle of the forest where no one would ever find it. But they put it right back where it was so the owners will find it. Is it sending some kind of message? Is there something wrong with that cow that they want the people to figure out? So 3 months later, they found another mutilated cow. Tom reports that he had seen mysterious lights flying low over his ranch nights previous to when the cows disappeared. And the lights were almost commonplace even when cows didn't disappear. So the 4-year-old cows had the rear ends and the reproductive organs bored out. Tom was just irate. Loss of dollars and cents from his business. Trespassers, I don't care what you call it, they are trespassers. Early in 1996, the Gormans lost 2 more cattle to mutilations. And again, it was exactly like the others. The skill of a trained physician, surgeon. They were almost like laser cut. And each time there were lights in the sky. And the comment was, these are most commonly done during heavy lightning and thunderstorms. Weather event. Never any tracks, never any blood, just as I explained. The question is, how could any technology function under those conditions? Huge lightning storm, high winds, just, you can imagine those, that even a big jumbo 747 won't fly into a thunderstorm. Well, Tom felt at the time, he was internalizing this, that this was being done to him. And he didn't realize that this was an event happening all over the western U.S. in large numbers. In 75 to 1977, there were 2 counties that had 200 mutilated cows in Colorado. The governor hired an FBI investigator named Ken Rommel. He never did any necropsy on any animal. He had a predetermined belief system, supposedly. He did no advanced pathology on any animal. He said, the problem's solved, don't worry about it, it's predators. I can tell you that royally ticked off thousands of people in the western U.S. who knew it wasn't predators. So, it's almost as though retired FBI agent Rommel was getting paid off to do this. Because as somebody who's been on mutilation sites, I can tell you that there's no misperception about what happened. If there's no tracks around the mutilated animal, and he says, oh, it's predators coming up to prey on it, where are the tracks? When predators prey on an animal, they tear it, blood's everywhere. Where's the blood? There's basically two camps in the law enforcement communities that are investigating this. One can't believe that it was merely just other predation by animals. Others believed it was some type of alien or human. Some people felt it was a cult. But without the evidence I just explained to you, I don't understand how some of these people came to their conclusions. It's bizarre. I don't understand how some people think. The book says that there's a researcher named Tommy Bland who claimed mutations of livestock happened in England and Scotland as far back as 1810. Only a small amount of the mutations, mutilations are ever really reported. And here's the best example of that I can give you. One of my best friends, their family owns a dairy farm. And he talked to his dad about mutilations and suspicious things that have happened on the ranch over the years. And they walked away from everybody. And this is what was said. Said that cattlemen are very protective of their breed and of their stock. They don't ever want a word getting out that something was disabled, bred inappropriately, deformed, and the last thing they ever want to talk about is mutilations. He said that he had had some strange things happen on this ranch during 40 years. But he goes, what? He said, well, about 5 years ago, a mama cow gave birth to a stillborn calf. And he said it was really cold. It was the middle of the night. He said he put the mama away in the barn, left the calf there, and was going to get rid of it in the morning. Said he comes back in the morning. It's still in the middle of the corral. I mean, it was left in the middle of the corral, in a muddy corral. And he said, it was gone. And he said, no, it's really gone. He said, there were no tracks. There were no drag marks. My buddy said, well, what happened to it? He goes, I don't know. He says, it was one of the freakiest things that ever happened there. He also says he's been in other parts of the ranch, in the far corner area, mending the fence. This is what he told him. He said that he had his back turned to a certain remote area on the other side of the fence. He was working on the fence. He said that something told him in his brain, do not turn around. Do not turn around. He said he spent a few more seconds mending the fence, got into the ATV, never turned around, drove away. For people that really don't want to know, I mean, their ranch is their heaven. They don't want to know something's going on. They don't want to know something evil may be nearby or anything odd may be nearby. They don't want to know. So, there have been 24 cases of mutilations in the Uinta Basin before the Gormans arrived, per law enforcement. As far back as the 1960s, cases had happened on the Gorman Ranch per law enforcement contacts. the prior owners had called the sheriff. He'd come out and validated that, yeah, they had happened. So the basin where Skinwalker Ranch is at has been a hotbed of activity for decades. This isn't something new. Now remember I was telling you that the state of Colorado hired this private investigator, they in New Mexico, private investigator, retired FBI agent, to look into mutilated cows, mutilated livestock. Well, at one point, the state of Colorado and some investigators were flying over the western part of Colorado, and flew into the eastern part of Utah. And ranchers had seen them land on their property near downed cows. One thing that people, others in the community would say, if there's a large number of cattle that suddenly die, or there's a large number of cattle that suddenly disappear, a lot of times it's insurance fraud. And that's how it's viewed by others in the community. In the 90s, one New Mexico ranch lost 24 cattle. A Northern California ranch lost 30 cattle. A northern Saskatchewan ranch named in Makwa lost 12 mutilations of cows in 2 years. Now, where's Makwa? I had to look it up. I thought you'd like to see it too. So, this is Saskatchewan. This is Alberta. This is the Montana border. It's the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. You go south down here, and it goes far down here, and this is Glacier National Park over in this area. Makwa is right here, around tons of water, right near the Alberta border. Well, when I looked up the mutilations in Saskatchewan, I thought, oh, it kind of matches the terrain where my people have been disappearing. That's a little odd. So maybe there's a terrain match, geography match. So the authors write, the decimation of a registered herd, like the Gormans had, was highly unusual. Registered herd, pride herd, top of the line pedigree animals that were used for breeding purposes. Now the breeding part of this interests me. Was there something in that line or in that pedigree of animal that was dangerous? And every time it bred, it passed that on. Is there something about that animal that we're missing? I wish I knew. But if you go back to the mentality of ranchers, and they don't want others to know of a possible problem within their property, then you understand the secrecy. Don't talk about it. If this is the rancher, I don't even want a vet coming out and looking at it, because he'll tell others. So, you pick it up, you shovel, and you bury it, and you forget it. And that's kind of the mentality. Now, the reality of it is, mutilations of animals have continued to this day. And I honestly believe it's our own stupidity that we haven't been able to figure this out. There's some reason those animals are being tested. Those animals. Why those? It's the $1 million question. They are placed back for us to find. Yes. So we find them, we look at them, we take a few pictures, we maybe take a couple skin samples, but do we take any tissue samples to test for disease, test for a multitude of things? Probably not, because that costs money and the rancher doesn't want to spend the money. There is no national agency looking into this. The FBI way back in the 70s said they didn't want anything to do with the topic. Remember that. It bothers me. And the ranchers continue to lose stock. Well, if our federal government had anything to do with this, then they wouldn't want the FBI looking into it. Now, after years of studying that topic, mutilations, I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence between it's something out of this world and it is our government, because there's evidence that points to both. And as we move forward in the next review of the book, I'll explain more about how we're going to get to that point. So in the meantime, be nice to your neighbors, be nice to your friends, do something nice for anyone out there in the world, just like you'd like someone to do something nice for you. It doesn't cost you anything. Thank you for being here. Remember, this is the third book review. I have two others, and they'll be under the comments, the first comment on this video. You have a great week. Paulides out.